Please move stand for the chair.
Good evening, everybody. Please sit down. We have received 2 valid questions from members of the public. Question 1. Is Ms Bennett in attendance? Would you like to take your question as read, or would you like to read it?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It is widely known that St Mary's Island Nature Reserve car parks are hotspots for antisocial and illegal behaviour throughout the evening and night. The 24-hour vehicle access sees a nighttime increase in activities such as gathering of cars, dogging, which is the practice of watching or engaging in exhibitionist sexual activity in a public place, racing of cars both up and down reserve roads and around the car parks, donutting, where a driver revs the engine hard and puts the car into a spin with tyre rubber burning, continuous and synchronised blaring of horns, deliberate hard revving of car exhausts with noise-enhancing effect, blatant use of drugs, playing loud music, littering, urinating and defecating, use of offensive language, intimidating behaviour to visitors and volunteers working on site. It is not uncommon to have all of these activities occurring in a single evening. St Mary's Island Nature Reserve is a place where people should be able to enjoy the peace and quiet of the natural environment, and a place where wildlife is afforded protection from disturbance, which surely puts these activities into conflict with the very ethos of a nature reserve. We're aware that Northumbria Police have carried out Operation Dragoon in conjunction with the DVLA, and North Tyneside Council is proposing possible controls on certain activities. However, these are not intended to be a long-term solution to tackling the widespread antisocial behaviour I have mentioned. As this behaviour has been going on for some time, my question is, does North Tyneside Council intend to address the problem of nighttime antisocial behaviour on the nature reserve, and if so, how and when? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Bennett. Councillor Carl Johnson, would you respond, please?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your question. We know that antisocial behaviour is a key concern for our residents, as it is every councillor in this chamber. The elected mayors established a multi-agency task force earlier this year that promotes a problem-solving approach to antisocial behaviour. As well as having a cross-party support, it includes a range of partners such as Northumbria Police, Nexus, Voda, the Business Forum, and Newcastle United Foundation. The task force has been well supported by all. I'm pleased the recent data the group has been reviewing shows a significant downward trend, and we'll keep going with our collective efforts to solve antisocial behaviour. The Council is working in partnership with police colleagues and is listening to their views on how we work together to manage the car parks and surrounding public spaces. There is an action plan that covers the nature reserve, which includes visiting the Lighthouse car park. As part of this plan, the community protection and security teams regularly monitor and patrol the island and surrounding areas using mobile CCTV vehicles. Where we do witness acts of antisocial behaviour, such as littering and noise disturbance, we ourselves will take enforcement action. Wardens operating our CCTV vehicle will report any illegal activity to Northumbria Police and share the footage to enable enforcement action. In addition, our security control room will report speeding vehicles directly to the police, captured on the fixed CCTV camera covering the approach to the lighthouse via the Links Road A183. The Project Vita team have also added the Lighthouse car park to the list of hotspots. As chair of the North Tyneside Antisocial Behaviour Task Force, I will ensure that full consideration is given to what further reasonable steps could be taken to minimise antisocial behaviour in that area and address the perception of antisocial behaviour. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Ms Bennett, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
Yes, I'd be interested to know what is considered reasonable steps to tackle such antisocial behaviour.
The reasonable steps will be anything that could reasonably be taken to stop that antisocial behaviour happen. The task force will consider this issue in particular and will take any steps it considers appropriate and necessary to tackle this behaviour.
Thank you. Question 2. Is Mr. Steele here tonight? No. Councillor Johnson, would you like to respond to Mr. Steele's question, please?
Thank you, Chair. The local plan sets out a sustainable spatial strategy for development, which, among other matters, seeks to reduce the need to travel, protect natural assets, and provides policy support for the local production of energy from low carbon and renewable sources. It does not contain specific policy on emission standards, that it was not supported by national policy at the time of its adoption. In reviewing the plan this year, it was recognised that climate change as an issue has come to even greater focus, not least with the Council declaring a climate emergency in 2019. The improvements in construction techniques and energy efficiency already achieved mean the new homes are substantially more energy efficient than much of the existing stock in North Tyneside. Retrofitting existing housing stock remains a substantial challenge, but is outside of planning control. However, the local plan remains relevant in terms of existing and emerging legislation, and that it continues to ensure the new development is the highest possible standard. Whilst it currently remains a legislative option for an energy emissions policy to be introduced into any replacement plan, the 2020 uplift to the building regulations, expected to achieve a 30% carbon reduction emission, the soundness of the spatial strategy, and the clear advice on the promotion of sustainable development and tackling climate change mean the plan continues to support the goals of climate change emergency. Its policies make a strong and achievable response to climate change while striking a balance between sustainability and economic objectives. In terms of how the government has progressed its zero carbon homes proposal since this time, a consultation document, the Future Home Standard 2019, set out proposals regarding energy efficiency to be achieved through building regulations. It clarified that the planning system would not likely to have a role in setting energy efficiency standards, and which the provisions in the Planning and Energy Act, which allowed the local planning authority to set reasonable standards, would be revoked. There will be annual reviews of the plan, and although the government expects it will become increasingly less likely that LPAs will set local energy efficiency standards to achieve a net zero goal, as other legislative changes continue to drive further improvements, will ensure the plan continues to support our target for a zero carbon borough.
Councillor. Mr. Steele, have you just... is that Mr. Steele who's just come in? Would you like to ask a supplementary question? You would need to go to the microphone, Mr. Steele. You go to the microphone, please. Thank you. And it's your supplementary question which you're asking now.
Yeah. And it's difficult to ask a supplementary question when I haven't heard the answer to my original question. But what I will say is the building developments that have been going on, just now I've looked at the plans and I can't find any indication of high environmental standards, no solar panels, no windmills, no air source or ground source heating. And I think that if the answer to the question was that there's a cost to those things, I think the cost of the credibility of the Council's zero carbon targets, the cost to the residents of the houses...
Mr. Steele,
yes?
You're not here to make a speech, but to ask a supplementary question.
Yeah, I've got a minute, I believe, to ask my question. Yeah. So I need to put a wee bit of context behind this. The cost to the people who are going to live in that house in terms of energy bills when we're facing a cost of living crisis, and the cost of retrofitting the houses, never mind the cost of the planet, I think are intolerable. And I just wonder if that's something the Council are happy to be dealing with.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Councillor Johnson, would you like to respond, please?
It's good to hear Mr. Steele supports all the things the next Labour government will introduce to make houses as energy efficient as possible. In regards to Mr. Steele's response, it wasn't about cost. My answer was certainly not about cost. We have standards that we want the highest possible energy efficiency standards through the planning process. We always try and work to gain them. The National Planning Policy Framework has a viability assessment introduced for every development in North Tyneside. With that viability assessment, that is when developers will often use that opportunity to run down their standards of environmental efficiency in buildings. That is a statutory process that the Conservative government set out that we have to follow in terms of the energy efficiency standards, and in terms of the viability process, and that was where they often fall down. If the viability assessment is not met, that's when they have the opportunity to try and remove them, which I don't think should be in there, and hopefully is something a Labour government in the future will solve. Mr Steele will be really glad to note, however, that we have just the building of our first zero carbon building in North Tyneside is nearly complete. The new North Shields bus interchange that the council is building will be a zero carbon building, and when we are building something, we will always strive to make the highest standards building possible when the council directly controls that building. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. I'd like to thank the members of the public for their questions. We now move on to item 2, apologies. I have received apologies from Councillors Ken Barry, Brian Burders, Carol Burders, Karen Clark, Julie Crudders, Muriel Green, Trish Neera and Andy Newman. Are there any other apologies for absence? Yes, Councillor Graham.
Councillor Kerwin.
Thank you.
Chair.
Is that...
Councillor Day and Councillor Rankin are both running late.
Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe.
Councillor Percy.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you. Councillor McIntyre will be coming direct from work.
Thank you. Anyone else? Declarations of interest. Can I remind members if they have any registrable and or non-registrable interests in matters appearing on the agenda and the nature of the interest, they must verbally declare in respect of any items of business to be discussed at this meeting and the nature of such interests. You are also invited to disclose any dispensation from the requirement to declare any registrable and or non-registrable interests that have been granted to you in respect of any matters appearing on the agenda. Those members should also complete the card on their desks and return it to the receptacle located on the desk of the Democratic Services Officer before leaving. Yes, Councillor Johnson.
I have an interest in motion 1. I am a member of the Tyne and Wear Fire Authority. I have a dispensation for that interest.
Thank
Chair.
you. Councillor Hunter.
Chair, I have exactly the same
I can
declaration as...
Thank you. Councillor Drummond.
Chair, item agenda number 6, motion 1. I work for Tyne and Wear Fire and Rescue Service and I'll be leaving the room.
Thank you. Councillor Bartoli.
Non-registrable personal interest in motion number 6. I'm a landlord of a property that has a restaurant in it.
Thank you. Councillor Scargill.
I have a non-registrable personal interest in the motion 7. I train within the North East and North Cumbria integrated care system.
Thank you. Councillor Mulvenna.
I think I've got an interest because I'm a member of the ICS, integrated care system or whatever they call it. Ultimately it would actually, motion 7 I think it is, would ultimately come to that.
Thank you, Councillor Mulvenna. Thank you. Councillor O'Shea. Anybody else? No. Right. We now move on to item 4. The next item is the minutes of the council meeting held on the 22nd of September, which have been previously circulated. Can I ask council to confirm those minutes, please? Thank you. The next item is minutes of the council meeting held on the 3rd of November 22, which have been previously circulated. Can I ask council to confirm those minutes, please? Thank you. I seem to have lost 6. Item 6. Can I ask Councillor Carl Johnson to introduce the chair of the Independent Remuneration Panel, Mr. John Anderson, and invite him to present the report. Item 7. Yes, this report requests the Council to consider the recommendation of the Independent Remuneration Panel in relation to the Members' Allowances Scheme for 2023 to 24. Councillor Johnson, would you please introduce the Chair of the Independent Remuneration Panel, Mr John Anderson, and invite him to present the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, delighted to introduce Mr John Anderson, who is Chair of our Independent Remuneration Panel. I just want, in advance of John's report, thank him and the panel for all their work in putting this report together. So, over to you, John.
Have a seconder, Councillor Johnson. Thank you, Councillor Graham. I now invite members to speak to the motion. Sorry? Mr Anderson, I beg your pardon. Mr Anderson, would you now give the report? Thank you.
Apologies accepted. Thank you. Firstly, I apologise for having a sore throat. Very important that I pass that on. I went to the doctors today and instantly I said it's not COVID, but he gave me some medicine which I'm now taking. And he said, come back in 3 weeks if it's not better. So I'm looking forward to the next 3 weeks, at which time I should be better. Thank you very much indeed for that. Now I want to go on to my report. So good evening. I'm John Anderson, CBE, the Chair of North Tyneside Independent Remuneration Panel. And I'm here to present the panel's report on the Members' Allowance Scheme for 2023-24. As you will be aware, the authority is required to approve a members' allowances scheme prior to the commencement of each financial year, and the Council is required to have regard to the views of the Independent Remuneration Panel before agreeing the scheme. In previous years, it has been agreed that members' allowances will be index-linked to the annual pay award for the authority's employees. The pay award this year was not a percentage uplift, but was a set monetary amount for all employees. Therefore, the Independent Remuneration Panel has considered a range of options and concluded that the most appropriate action to calculate a percentage increase based on the median payment point in the authority pay scale. The panel considers the continuation of the index-linked approach the appropriate approach and should continue into future years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Anderson. I now invite members to speak to the motion. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate again all the work you and the panel have done on this report. Times are tough in this borough now, and we're suffering the economic consequences of successive and current Tory governments' disastrous economic policy. Our residents face a cost of living crisis made in Downing Street. The Labour group do not believe it is right to increase council allowances during this time. Therefore, Chair, I move and ask for the whole chamber to support the noting of the Independent Remuneration Panel report and recommendations. We move that the members' allowance scheme for the financial year 2023-24 remains unchanged from the 2022-23 scheme, and therefore that there be no allowance increase for the year 2022-23. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. I now invite members to speak to the motion. Councillor Bones.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad that Councillor Johnson has seen sense and unlike the recommendation within the report, we'll be moving for a council tax freeze, which is something that this opposition party has long called for. We will absolutely be supporting the freeze in councillors' allowances, which can't be justified at a time where council is eyeing up a 5% council tax increase. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bones. Is there anyone else? Can I now invite Councillor Johnson to exercise a right of reply, although it seems to be pretty unanimous?
Thank you, Chair. I will just say, Councillor Bones talks about a council tax freeze. He wants to write to Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt and introduce the council tax freeze. I'll write alongside him to do that, not a problem. But, Chair, I do want to again thank John. I know they did consider all the options available in the report, and we really do appreciate the work that you did. But this year, the group and the council do feel that's not the right time to put up members' allowances. But I do want to still thank you for all the work that you've done this year, Mr Anderson. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Anderson. We'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? That seems to be unanimous. Thank you. The next item is motions. 7 valid motions have been received as detailed in the agenda. Please note details of the legal and financial implications of each of the motions have been circulated to all members prior to this meeting. Motion number 1. Can I invite Councillor Carl Johnson to move the motion, please?
Thank you, Chair. I wrote this motion as non-political as I possibly could. This is a motion which was discussed and extensive at the Fire Authority, where both the Conservatives and Lib Dems are both represented on the Fire Authority, and we agreed to go and talk to our councils about this. The motion's pretty clear. Firefighters do an amazing job for our borough. Their pay and terms and conditions simply are not good enough, so we want support from the national government to improve their pay and terms and conditions. I'll not go beyond that, Chair, because I do want it to remain non-political. I do hope for support from across the chamber. If the opposition don't do that, then I'll probably say some more on my right to reply. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Willie Samuel, do you wish to second this motion?
Happy to do so. I thought Councillor Hunter was going to second it, but happy to second.
Thank you.
Reserve the right to speak.
I'll now invite members to speak to the motion. Councillor Westwater.
Thank you. I want to begin by thanking Councillor Burgess, Johnson and Hunter for proposing this timely and very important motion. The Conservative group will be supporting it. We need to appreciate the prudent financial management led by the executive leadership team at the Fire and Rescue Service. This careful and responsible approach was validated earlier this year when the service was rated good by His Majesty's Inspectorate. The hard work and dedication of staff and frontline firefighters that helped achieve that outcome must also be commended. We must rightly identify a range of factors responsible for the acute inflationary pressures now being felt across the public sector. Yes, some are domestic, but others are international and related to the war in Ukraine and the emergency measures taken in response to the COVID pandemic. Thankfully, the relative stability has now returned to Downing Street, and I have confidence that the Government is committed to working with the Bank of England in order to bring inflation under control. I sincerely hope that the new Chancellor makes good on his promise to introduce fair and compassionate measures to restore market stability while still protecting the most vulnerable. For the avoidance of doubt, I believe the same fairness and compassion must extend to our blue light services. Fire authorities, particularly those here in the North East that do not enjoy a high council tax base, are no exception. Recently, the Fire Brigades Union has rejected a revised pay increase by the national employers. I feel strongly that the Home Office should review its position and consider the release of additional funding to support an increased pay offer, up to a defined threshold as it is done with the police service. The delayed response from the Home Office on this point is somewhat disappointing for me. It demonstrates maybe a lack of respect for operational and control room personnel. It is essential Government acts now to minimise the risk of and ideally avert altogether strike action, which despite resilience and contingency planning would have a devastating effect on response capability, and therefore we will be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Westwater. Does anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Samuel, did you wish to speak? Thank you. We'll now go to the vote then. All those in favour? And this appears to be unanimous as well. Thank you. Motion 2 has been withdrawn, so we move on to motion 3. Can I invite Councillor Erin Parker-Leonard to move the motion, please?
Thank you, Chair. Our WASPI women need our support. In the 1995 Pension Act, the Government increased the state pension age for women from 60 to 65, with a further increase to 66 in the 2011 Pensions Act. The change was not properly communicated to 3.8 million women born in the 1950s until 2012, giving some women only 1 year's notice of a 6-year increase by their anticipated retirement age. It also had a wider impact on our borough. Women who would have looked after older relatives or partners are unable to afford to do so, with a knock-on impact on local social care. Women who would have retired and engaged in caring responsibilities for grandchildren are having to continue to work, increasing the childcare burden on the estate locally. Women who have been left in poverty are struggling to meet their housing costs, with a knock-on impact on local housing stock. There is a broader impact on voluntary services of all kinds locally, which are missing out on able active volunteers who would otherwise have been able to retire from full-time work as planned. The impact on individuals is also stark. 13,200 of the affected women are in our own authority area, and a total of 65,000 across the North East. Research commissioned by campaign group WASPI has found that by the end of 2022, more than 220,000 1950s born women will have died waiting for justice since the WASPI campaign began in 2015. WASPI's research revealed that over the course of the 2-year COVID pandemic, 1 in 10 women who died were affected by these uncommunicated changes. They had lost both their state pension income and the opportunity to make alternative retirement plans before they died. Despite the Ombudsman's findings and the rapid death rate of those affected, the government is choosing to wait for further reports before taking any action. The Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman has found that the Department for Work and Pensions was guilty of maladministration in its handling of the state pension age increase for women born in the 1950s. I hope that you will support this motion. WASPI women affected need a one-off compensation payment in line with recommendations of the all-party parliamentary group on state pension equality for women. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Parker-Leonard. Councillor Josephine Muzingwa, do you wish to second this motion?
Thank you, Chair. I am seconding this motion because justice delayed is justice denied. It is already too late for WASPI women who have died since the campaign started many years ago. What a bitter taste this must leave for many families in the North Tyneside. If we remember, the DWP Minister, Laura Trott, was asked and was unable to comment when asked by the SNP Minister Alan Brown about the impact of cost of living crisis on 3.8 million women, WASPI women, who have been affected by the retirement, by the change to the retirement age. By voting for this motion, we can at least show our moral support for agent action rather than procrastination, even more delay. The compensation scheme advocated in this motion will be an economic boost for North Tyneside, as well as practical recognition of the unfairness and the establishment has imposed to for so many years. Our WASPI women deserve our backing, as there was gross negligence and injustice, not only to their emotional well-being, but also to their also adding financial hardships and also affecting the wider community of North Tyneside, that is their families. So I urge all of us to support this motion, as it will change lives of those affected. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Muzingwa. I now invite members to speak to the motion. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if I should declare this, but I am a WASPI woman myself.
I had this discussion with council officers before, and no, you don't need to.
Right, okay. As has been said, over 200,000, since this legislation was introduced, over 200,000 women have actually died and not received the proper pensions. Women who have probably been carers, women who've probably not been able to join an occupational pension scheme at work and been denied the access to those funds. Personally, my friend who I actually work with, she was born in the November, and a friend over the road was born in the April before 1950, and she actually had to She saw her friend, who was only 5 months older than her, get her bus pass, get her pensions, and be able to receive all those benefits, which she deservedly should have. But my friend had to actually work on with, and she had stage 4 breast cancer. She had to stay until 65 because she couldn't afford to leave any earlier. After she left at retirement age, she actually ended up with mental health issues for the year. And this was all because she'd planned to leave at 62, and then all of a sudden, within a signature on a bill, she was actually made to work 3-4 years longer. I hope that this is going to be another decision that this chamber takes unanimously, and that we all support the WASPI women as it is a cross-party issue. Thank you.
Councillor Davis. Does anyone else wish to speak? I'd now like to invite Councillor Parker-Leonard to exercise her right of reply.
That's fine, thank you.
We'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Thank you. Have you got them? Yeah. Those against? So we have 9 abstentions. Thank you. So that's 40 in favour and 9 abstentions. Seven abstentions. We now move on to motion 4. Can I invite Councillor Eddie Dark to move the motion, please?
Thank you, Chair. With the passing of the Election Act in April, it now means that it is mandatory that photograph ID is required for voting in the UK parliamentary, local elections in England, plus the Police and Crime Commissioner elections. That's if you attend the polling station, even if you hand your postal vote on election day at the polling station. You will have to have voter ID. The new requirements could lead to many thousands of voters being turned away at the ballot box, throwing our democracy process into chaos, disarray, and could lead to court action. The vast majority of voter ID approved by the government are available to older people, whilst a very few are targeted to people under 60. Young people could be disenfranchised. Like myself, I can use my older person's concessionary pass, yet the 16 to 25-year-old rail card used in the 28 pilot scheme will not be allowed. The Election Commission has highlighted that delays in the secondary legislation, which is not to be due to be discussed until January 23, leaves limited time for electoral administrators to implement the new voter ID process and ensure that voters must know that they have to have acceptable forms of ID. Delays and increase in the risk of ineffective or inconsistent implementation will affect public confidence in elections. With the new idea, you need to have extra staff at the polling station, which the government are going to give a greater fund. But that staff member will have to decide if a person voting at the polling station can vote or not, which I would suspect will lead to a lot of conflict. Also, that anyone, mainly women, who attend the polling station with face covering, that member of staff will have to ask that person to remove the face covering to see if it tallies with the photo. This again could lead to people leaving the polling station without casting a vote. If you look at the number of electors who voted at this year's elections at the polling stations, out of 107,286, there was only 23,850 voted. And I would guess that figure will reduce next year because of these implementations. But if you compare that with the postal vote, it was 33,935 voted. That was 67% of the vote for people who had postal votes. So if we believe in democracy, we as a council must encourage electors to vote. We must inform them of the new rules applying to voting and ask them to sign up to a postal vote to guarantee them a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dark. Councillor Carl Johnson, do you wish to second this motion?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to really highlight some of the other changes that Councillor Dark talked about as well. One of the big changes to this borough will be the mayoral election changes. In future, we will use first past the post mayoral election, as opposed to the current method we use with ranked choice voting. Postal votes will be time limited at 3 years from now in future. So there are some massive potential changes to elections coming in. We really do need all of our residents to be as informed as they possibly can be to ensure they take their democratic right to vote and elect their representatives. So we hope everyone in the Chamber will support this motion, Chair.
Johnson. I'll now invite members to speak to the motion. Councillor Bones. Or John O'Shea.
Thank you, Chair. I believe that I have an amendment for this motion.
Do you have a seconder for the amendment?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Scargill. Is that the amendment up on the...
Yeah.
We all had a chance to read it.
So I move this amendment to ensure that taxpayers' money is not used in a party political manner. The Elections Act seeks to ensure that our elections are safe and secure, and it was nice to see some of the opposition councillors argue against safe and secure elections in their opening remarks. We agree that residents should be informed of the changes, which is why we've submitted this simple amendment to ensure that taxpayers' money is not used to further any party political agenda. I hope it will receive support from across the Chamber, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bones. Councillor Thurlaway.
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking at the statistics on 2019. The last time we had a general election, 4 people were convicted for electoral fraud. That's 4. How many people were convicted for partying in Downing Street?
Thank you, Councillor Thurlaway. Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Johnson.
Chair, the original motion is pretty straightforward. This amendment, all it does, by the looks of it, is levy some pretty ridiculous accusations that our council officers that would be writing this information anyway would always be politically neutral. They would not take anything from this, no matter what side of the chamber. They would always ensure any guidance is provided by the Electoral Commission. I don't think I can support an amendment which levies some pretty accusations at our officers, Chair. The original motion is pretty straightforward, and frankly, the fact that the opposition have felt the need to take out which had the potential to disenfranchise voters when Tory Lords, Tory MPs have all raised that themselves. That does have the impact to disenfranchised voters. There was a number of amendments that the Lords did put back into the bill when it originally went through Parliament that the Conservatives scrapped, that Tory Lords put forward. I don't see the need to levy accusations on our officers when they will always do the absolute best they can for this council, would never ever use a compromise in neutrality, and they would always use Electoral Commission guidance in the first place anyway, Chair. So I can't see us, I can't support this amendment, Chair, when the original motion does exactly this anyway.
Councillor Dark, would you like the right of reply before we go to the vote on the amendment?
I was going to say it basically on the same.
Sorry, Councillor Bartoli, sorry, I didn't see you.
Sorry, Chair, I wasn't being particularly clear. I'm just confused by Councillor Johnson's comments there, in that he's insisting that our officers will always be neutral and will always use the correct wording, but is unwilling to put it in because somehow it forces them to do something they're already going to do, would seem a contradiction. So I'm confused as to why they can't support that change.
Chair, I know I've already spoken about point of personal clarification, Chair, as per the SAD orders. We would happily accept using the language provided by the Electoral Commission part of it if the Conservative group would change the top line and leave that as was. If not, we will not accept it. If they want to leave the top line as was, we'll happily accept that part, but we're not willing to free and fair look that because there's no need to change that, Chair.
Councillor Bones?
I'm happy to remove the top part of the amendment and stick just with the line using language provided by the Electoral Commission to ensure neutrality, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Dark, would you like to exercise the right of reply?
I think it's all been said.
We're going to the vote on the amendment, not the original motion, the amendment. All of those in favour? Thank you. All those in favour? And that is unanimous. Thank you.
Session moves straight to vote on the amendment, Chair.
Yes,
Substantive motion, sorry.
We'll now go to the vote on the original motion. On the motion, not the... Yeah.
As amended.
As amended. And that's unanimous as well. Thank you. To motion 5. Can I invite Councillor Chris Johnson to move the motion, please?
Thank you, Chair. May I speak on the motion straight away, please? Thank you. This motion actually is self-explanatory. Its aims are very, very simple. Firstly, to try to achieve higher standards of care for our environment. And secondly, to make it easier for all residents to monitor work that is being undertaken. Now, we focused upon war memorials for several good reasons. Firstly, because they are a highly emotive issue, obviously. These memorials are very special to very many people. They're very special throughout the year, not just on Remembrance Sunday. Secondly, current maintenance of the war memorials is, we believe, rather symptomatic of the lower standards that are set in North Tyneside for caring for our environment. Memorials are like gardens, for goodness sake. They require attention little and often, not just one frenetic and costly purge before Remembrance Day. Next, many promises regarding the maintenance of memorials are made on the website. You can read them yourself. But the reality of these promises is badly, really badly implemented. Just take a look at the memorials in March, April, several months on after they had this purge. They're a disgrace, many of them. And finally, regular and high standards of maintenance are economically viable. Our proposals would be actually less costly, actually cheaper in the long run. Stitch in Time springs to mind. They will be cheaper in the long run and would not, as suggested in the financial implications here, incur additional costs. They will be less costly to ratepayers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Bartoli, do you wish to second this motion?
I do, thank you, Chair. Can I speak now to the motion?
Yes, by all
Thank you.
means.
So the motion being proposed today is a fairly specific one and deals with what has been an ongoing problem, which is the neglect throughout the year of our war memorials. The motion, however, speaks to a wider issue within the Council, which is a general neglect of our public realm and heritage assets. In Tynemouth alone, we've seen the library, a unique Georgian building in the middle of Front Street, fall into such a state of disrepair it was too expensive to salvage. The lights and planters around Queen Victoria's monument stood broken for years, and when finally the broken planters have been replaced, it was with second-hand plastic boxes with graffiti already on them. And more recently, the atrocious decision to dump a 7-storey block of flats to tower over the Grade 2 listed Victorian glass train station in the heart of the conservation area.
Sorry. Councillor Bartoli, that is completely irrelevant to the matter at hand.
I'll get back to the motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
The motion is not asking the Council to undertake more work. It is simply asking them to do the job which their magazines, websites, social media and Labour councillors claim they are doing. In this chamber a year ago, we were assured that our war memorials were regularly cleaned, and the Council's own website states they are regularly maintained. This is false. This motion aims to codify the promises that has already been made, create transparency and accountability around the process, and to be able to hold the Council to account if this duty fails. Most importantly, this approach saves money in the long term. Doing the job properly and regularly saves expensive bills in the future. To be clear, Labour need to do a better job of looking after North Tyneside's assets, take pride in the public realm, and this motion is one small step towards that.
Thank you, Councillor Bartoli. I'll now invite members to speak to the motion. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Could I refer Councillor Bartoli and Councillor Johnson to the legal implications, first of all, that you've been provided with, that under the War Memorials Local Authorities Powers Act 1923, the authority has the power, although not a duty, to maintain, repair and protect war memorials, and you'll see that in your papers today. But I will give you the background. The important work associated with war memorials involves both ongoing maintenance and cleaning and restoration works in partnership with the War Memorial Trust. Over the last few years, work carried out has been a programme of investment linked to the refurbishment of several first and second joint World War memorials held in North Tyneside Council's ownership. There has been a spend of £123,000 over the last 4.5 years. Investment in our war memorials is usually through a combination of grants received from the War Memorial Trust and contributions from the Council. Around £6,000 was funded externally, with the balance being directly funded from the Council. It should be noted, however, that the War Memorials Trust do not offer grants at all for memorials such as the Boer War memorials. Typically, the scope of works includes the replacement or improvements to external paving areas like stone repairs to the memorials, cast iron fencing replacement, and in some instances replacement plaques and re-engraving, commemorating those who have lost their lives during these conflicts. In addition, and where appropriate, a cleaning programme is also undertaken in accordance with the Historic England published guidance for the conservation and repair of war memorials. Where necessary, all works required are agreed in consultation with the War Memorial Trust, and listed building consents are also obtained. Following discussions at Council in 2021, officers appointed a specialist contractor to undertake a condition survey and assessment of all war memorials in North Tyneside ownership. The surveys were undertaken earlier this year, and a full report received by officers in the spring. This report assists officers to identify a programme of investment required to maintain and invest in our war memorials, and additionally, schemes are being worked up to cost and to seek funding for those repairs. Additionally, officers have also worked with the War Memorial Trust to carry out the required repair work to the New York Memorial following Storm Arwen damage. Linked up to the run-up to Remembrance Day 2022, a programme of works was planned, which included soft brush clean, in accordance with guidance from the War Memorial Trust, to 8 of our war memorials. Additionally, outside of the formal arrangements, the Environmental Service team also carry out the following very regular maintenance work to our war memorials. Those sites with grass surrounding the memorial are cut in line with grounds maintenance standards, with additional cut carried out in November prior to the Remembrance Sunday if needed. And it did this year because of the warm weather. Hedges and shrubs are pruned once per year in line with grounds maintenance standards, and this is timed to happen prior to Remembrance Sunday. Those sites with hard standing are weed sprayed 3 times a year, with a 4th if needed. Floral displays, barrier baskets and pots are planted up twice a year and are watered and weeded when required, with additional attention paid in advance of Remembrance Sunday. In the fortnight leading up to Remembrance Sunday, the cleansing team clean hard-standing areas after the summer with the power washer to remove dirt and moss. And turf is laid at sites where no grass is located a couple of days prior to Remembrance Sunday to allow for remembrance crosses to be laid.
1 minute, Councillor Graham.
And on the specific queries, item 1, officers carry out regular reviews of our memorials and pay particular attention to any required works. Officers already maintain a record of condition and work undertaken to all our memorials, and information can be provided to ward councillors for individual memorials upon request. The condition of our memorials is assessed by specialist contractors, and officers are always willing to work alongside ward councillors and will engage with the local community through established forums. And our current practice is to remove poppies and wreaths from memorials when they begin to deteriorate and look unsightly. Removal before this time does lead to upset from the public, some of whom have laid memorials for their loved ones.
I'm sorry, Councillor Graham, your time's up.
Thank you.
Have you just finished? Yeah, good. Councillor Johnson?
Thank you, Chair. I had hoped that this wouldn't be a political issue because no one should be trying to make political capital out of war memorials. We fully respect the work that goes into memorials. We respect that what they show for the families who have sadly lost their loved ones and served in the armed forces. We will be supporting this motion, Chair. I just had hoped it hadn't come with politics from the other side trying to make political gains from war memorials when nobody should be trying to make political gains from war memorials, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Thirlaway?
Chair, I attended the memorial in Wallsend, and I think the majority of councillors here attended services in their wards. To sit here and listen to Councillor Johnson and Councillor Bartoli politicise war memorials is an absolute disgrace, and it's an embarrassment to yourselves and to this council. I think this fake culture war that you're trying to whip up by exploiting war memorials is just outrageous.
Thank you, Councillor Thirlaway. Councillor Wallace?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Graham has chosen to highlight the fact that the local authority has the power, legal power, though not a duty, to maintain, repair and protect war memorials in the borough. I think it's rather pedantic, and I suggest rather mealy-mouthed, that in the matter of a war memorial, that it was felt necessary to highlight the difference between a legal power and a duty. These memorials, Chairman, are for those who died for our country, and there should be no question of distinguishing between powers and duties, I feel, in this instance. The general public expect, rightly, a high standard throughout the year of maintenance for our war memorials. The sacrifice made by those who died was forever. The suffering of the bereaved was forever, and the maintenance should also be forever. Thank you.
Councillor Wallace. Councillor Gary Bell?
Thank you. I don't need lectures. You've got to serve first, then you can lecture. I was the Armed Forces 25 years, as you know, and in 2018 the council did spend a lot of time with our friends at Capita, and we went around every war memorial, and a lot of them, like Whitley Bay, Benton and others, got the metal rail around them so that the wreaths could be put in because it used to blow away and all that. So there was a lot of work done on Whitley Bay and other memorials. I wanted to support this. When I saw it, I think the aims of the motion are fine. You know, more clarity maybe on what's being done, because a lot of work does go on during the year. And my memorials are fine. I've got no problems with mine in Benton Cemetery. Kilmarnock is not, is more a jigsaw memorial. But one day, you know, it wasn't very nice. Kilmarnock had been in bad weather, had been leaves and that. So me and Linda, my wife, we went cleaning ourselves. All you can use is soapy water. But if you be in the big society, maybe you might want to clean your war memorial. And maybe get a little group together or something like that. You can do that with war graves as well. I'm just disappointed that this is the other side are trying to tell me about my about war memorials and about sacrifice. I'm all about sacrifice, and you're there.
Councillor Bell. Councillor Graham, can you switch your microphone off, please? Can I now invite the mover of the motion to exercise a right of reply? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Our aim actually was simply to get North Tyneside to comply with many of the rules, regulations, call them what you will, that are actually on the website. Okay, you might well suggest that they are complying with them. The trouble is, residents pass us every day and say they're not. And it's really to allay their fears or frustrations or annoyance or disappointment or emotion in this particular case that we try to raise this in order that we have attention given to these memorials. There was no intention to politicise it. Okay, I'm not sure who said that, but there's no intention to politicise it. It's simple and straightforward. Okay, and I would recommend that we pass this. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. We'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Thank you. That looks unanimous, I think. Were there any abstentions? No? Thank you. Thank you. We now move on to motion 6. Can I invite Councillor Liam Bones to move the motion, please?
Thank you, Chair. North Tyneside has a great wealth of restaurants, which is where the motive behind this motion comes from. I know in the past there have been restaurant weeks in North Tyneside. I think the most recent one in 2017, with an attempt in 2020, which was flaunted by the COVID pandemic. This motion gives us an opportunity to bring visitors into North Tyneside and help residents explore new venues, all at a reduced cost. And within the motion, we've aimed to ask the Council to explore with Nexus the possibility of reduced travel on the Metro and the addition of free parking to really make it sort of up there with the Newcastle Restaurant Week in terms of success for both the borough and its residents. I hope this will be a cross-party agreement motion. I'm hopeful that this is something that we can all benefit from, particularly as times are tight. So yeah, I'm happy to open up the debate.
Thank you, Councillor Bones. Councillor Bartoli, do you wish to second the motion?
Thank you, Chair. I second the motion. I'm not going to take too much credit for this, but it has been Councillor Bones who's done the majority of the work, and ultimately this was his idea, which I think was an excellent one for the borough. What I would say is that the press coverage I think that we've seen so far has echoed the response that I've had from residents and businesses who've got wind of this, and I think they all think it's a really good idea for the borough overall.
Thank you, Councillor Bartoli. Councillor Johnson?
Thanks, Chair. I have notified of an amendment. I did also notify the Conservative group as an amendment as well, Chair.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, on that amendment as well, it's the addition of work with Nexus to explore the reduction of ticket prices as well, because as you see in the financial implications, I have spoken to the Director of Finance in advance of this motion. If we put to explore, that does remove that financial implication. So if worked with Nexus to explore the reduction of ticket prices as well as what's on the screen, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor.
So happy to support this motion. We think Restaurant Week's a great idea. The reason why we're moving this amendment in particular is that there already is a private sector company in the process of organising one this year. None of us in here, when times are tough, want a business that's already incurred costs to face reduction in those costs. Therefore, we will work with that provider this year to try and make this a roaring success for the fantastic restaurants around this borough, and review it afterwards to see if next year in 2023 the council can do it better, organising our house, or if the private company made a good success of this year, we work with them again. But really, happy to support Restaurant Week. I think it's a fantastic idea, and that's why we hope this amendment can be accepted across the chamber, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Do you have a seconder?
Seconded. Reserve the right to speak.
Does anyone wish to speak? On the amendment, yeah. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to accept this amendment, and it will receive the support of the Conservative group. I think it's particularly important that the Council does everything it can do to make it a roaring success, and I think the offer of free parking throughout Restaurant Week is a really appealing one, particularly when thinking about bringing residents into our town centres, which could do with the boost this winter and this spring. So yeah, happy to support this amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bones. We're now going to vote on the amendment. All those in favour? Let's get your habit. Thank you. I don't think there were any against or abstentions, were there? No, thank you. On the substantive motion, the original one. All those in favour? As amended. The amended one, yeah. The amended one. Have you all got that? Any abstentions? Anyone against? No. It's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you. Motion 7. Can I now invite Councillor Ollie Scargill to move the motion, please?
Thank you, Chair. Since its inception in 1978, in this country, IVF has helped millions of people across the world start a family. Fertility problems are much more common than people think. Around 1 in 7 couples have difficulty conceiving, and this is often devastating news. Unfortunately, access to IVF has become a postcode lottery. In North Tyneside, couples where just one partner has a child from a previous relationship aren't eligible for any rounds of IVF. This is not the case across the country, and many regard this as a dated policy. As councillors, we should of course be doing everything we can to make sure our residents have the best access to the best healthcare. That's why tonight I'm asking you to back this motion to help get more families in North Tyneside appropriate access to IVF. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scargill. Councillor Bones, do you wish to second this motion?
Second and reserve the right, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Labour Group very happy to support this motion. I am massively urging the urge to politicise it by making points about the concerted mismanagement of the NHS, but I want to support the best of this, what the residents of this borough need, so I will reserve the urge to make that political point, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson, I think. Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Bartoli.
I just want to thank Councillor Johnson for resisting the urge.
You must be getting near Christmas. Right, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Or any abstentions? No, that's unanimous. Thank you. We now move on to item 8, which is the appointment of the senior coroner. Can I ask the elected mayor to move the report, please?
Thank you, Chairman. The authority has a legal obligation to appoint a senior coroner for the Borough of North Tyneside. The authority's acting senior coroner, Mrs. Karen Duggs, was appointed to that office by the authority in September 2019, and who is also the senior coroner for Newcastle upon Tyne, and she is due to retire from both positions in early 2023. I would like to place on record on our behalf of the authority our thanks to the work that Mrs. Dilks has undertaken in her role as the authority's acting senior coroner since October 2019, which of course included the period when the COVID-19 pandemic was at its height and restrictions imposed which impacted on the working practices of the coroner and his staff. North Tyneside and Newcastle upon Tyne are currently separate coronial areas, but the authorities are in discussions with central government regarding the merger of the two jurisdictions into a single combined jurisdiction with one senior coroner for both areas. The authority in Newcastle City Council, therefore, undertook a joint recruitment exercise to appoint a senior coroner for both jurisdictions in anticipation of the merger for the two areas. The interview panel, which consisted of senior officers from this authority and Newcastle City Council, decided to offer the post of senior coroner for both areas to Ms. Georgina Nolan as the highest scoring candidate. As the appointment of the senior coroner is a judicial appointment, both the approval of the Chief Coroner and the Lord Chancellor to Ms. Nolan's appointment was required, which has been granted. Newcastle City Council appointed Ms. Nolan to be a senior coroner at a council meeting held on November 22. So I'm asking this council, please, if you're in agreement to agree to this lady. Just one moment, please, I get my papers. Yes, I'm asking you to agree this and recommend that Ms. Georgina Nolan as the new senior coroner for North Tyneside. I hope you can agree to that.
Thank you, Mayor Redfern. Do you have a seconder?
Seconded and reserve the right to speak, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Are there any questions? I'll now invite members to speak to the motion. No. We'll now go to the vote. All those in favour? That looks unanimous again. Is there anyone against or any abstentions? No. This is lovely. Thank you all. I'll be brief because I'm sure we all want to get an early night. It has been a busy and enjoyable 2 months since our last full council meeting. Just some of the highlights have been presenting awards at North Tyneside Adult Learning Awards, the toast to the Admiral, of course, and attending with the elected mayor the unveiling of a blue plaque in Tynemouth celebrating Susan Mary Ode, a remarkable lady, a naval architect who designed the floating vessels for the D-Day landings in 1944. I was delighted to present the Chair's Spirit of North Tyneside Award to Wheelchair Beach Access. It was a huge privilege during Armistice Week to lay wreaths at Killingworth, Wallsend and Whitley Bay. The events continue to be as well attended as ever, which is really, really pleasing. I also attended the State of the Area, which this year concentrated on the cost of living. We were entertained by my charity, the True Colours Theatre. Those of you who were there will know they were truly amazing. I just wanted to let you know that I have decided that as chair, I won't be sending Christmas cards this year, given the crisis of the rising cost of living. It seems appropriate to instead use the funds to provide food for the food bank. So I will now wish you all a very happy and healthy New Year. Thank you for your attendance. Mayor Redfern, do you have any announcements?
I didn't, but I have now. I just think it's rather sad with some of the things that are said in this chamber. I have to tell you that no way have we agreed a 5% interest increase in council tax, Councillor Bones. No way have we decided that. We're not one of the council that has agreed that at all. So I just wanted to make that clear. And I'm delighted that Councillor Bartoli wants to bring everybody into Tynemouth and share our wonderful assets that we neglect. But having said that, I just wanted to put those facts right, and that's my right. Thank you so much indeed. Thank you.
Good night, everyone, and I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas.